Hello, welcome back. If you're watching this, you notice that I had to put on a long sleeve shirt because it is the dead of winter in Corpus Christi, Texas, and we woke up this morning to temperatures in the 40s. So be praying for us. We got 6 weeks of this probably, and then it'll warm up again because we live in an amazing place, and it's a lot to behold, but it is also an amazing place to live, and I'm grateful for it. So if you're joining us for the first time, please go back and see some of the earlier videos and studies, because this is not going to make a whole lot of sense otherwise, because a lot of it is based on what happened in Leviticus. And if you don't have that foundation, some of this is going to make no sense whatsoever. But I take that back. It'll make some sense. It'll just be a little bit harder for you. Also, 16, 17, and 18 are basically one unit. I'm going to break up the chapters because there's so much there. I think they need their own uh, particular video for. So that's why we're going to do it that way. I'm going to jump into uh, Numbers chapter 16, and I'm going to read from the New Living Translation and the Complete Jewish Bible, because I think there's a couple of things I just want to point out as to why I rail about versions all the time. In the Complete Jewish Bible, it says this: Now Korach, the son of Ikar, the son of Kahat, and the son of Levi, along with Datan and Abiram, the sons of Elavav, and On, the son of Pelet, descendants of Reuben, took men and rebelled against Moshe. And Moses' Hebrew name is Moshe. Siding with them were 250 men of Israel, leaders of the community, key members of the council, men of reputation. They assembled themselves against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much on yourselves. After all, the entire community is holy, every one of them, and Adonai is among them. So why do you lift yourselves up above Adonai's assembly?" And then in the New Living Translation, it says this: One day, Korah, son of it, the names and everything, they incited a rebellion against Moses, along with 250 other leaders of the community, all prominent members of the assembly. They united against Moses and Aaron and said, "You have gone too far. The whole community of Israel has been set apart by the Lord, and he is with all of us. What right do you have to act as though you were greater than the rest of the Lord's people?" I like the way they're both kind of worded, uh, because, and I put them together like that so you would see some of the emotion in the English just doesn't come across. And when you go to the more true to the original Hebrew, you see some of that emotion. Like we're going to see right as in verse 4, we're going to see it right here. When Moshe heard this, he fell on his face. Then he said to Korach and the whole group, "In the morning, Adonai will show you who are his and who is his holy person. He will allow, and who is the holy person he will allow to approach him. Yes, he will bring whomever he chooses near to himself. Do this. Take censers, Korach, and all your group. Put fire in them and put incense in them before Adonai tomorrow. The one whom Adonai chooses will be the one who is holy. It is you, you sons of Levi, who are taking too much power on yourselves." And if you go back to the New Living Translation, it says, When Moses heard what they were saying, he fell face down on the ground. Then he said to Korah and his followers, "Tomorrow morning the Lord will show us who belongs to him and who is holy. The Lord will allow only those whom he selects to enter his holy presence. Korah, you and all your followers must prepare your incense burners. Light fires in them tomorrow and burn incense before the Lord. Then we will see whom the Lord chooses as his holy one. You Levites are the ones who have gone too far." In the English, it sounds like he's upset about what they've said. And he's not necessarily upset about what they've said. He's upset that they said it, because he understands they're not challenging him. They're challenging God. And the reason he falls down on his face in worship and awe of God is because he's basically begging him not to just wipe them all out, because he cannot imagine what's going to happen. And he expects that from God because God's not okay with that kind of stuff. When you question his decisions, and he put Moses in charge. Uh, so let's read on. It is for you a mere trifle that God of Israel has separated you from the community of Israel to bring you close to himself, so that you can do the work of the tabernacle of Adonai and stand before all the community serving them. He has brought you close, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. Now you want the office of Cohen too? That's why you and your group have gathered together against Adonai. After all, what is Aaron that you complain against him? Then Moshe sent to summon Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they replied, "We won't come up. Is it such a mere trifle, bringing us up from a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert, that now you arrogate yourself to the role of dictator over us? You haven't at all brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, and you haven't put us in possession of fields and vineyards. Now you think you can gouge out these men's eyes and blind them? We won't come up." Now remember, they're talking about, hey, all these promises we've been hearing and all these things God's been saying, they hadn't happened yet. We're tired of waiting. We want to be in charge of some stuff. So Moshe was very angry and said to Adonai, "Don't accept their grain offering. I haven't taken one donkey from them. I've done nothing wrong to any of them." Moshe said to Korah, "You and your group be there before Adonai tomorrow, you, they, and Aaron. Each of you take his fire pan and put incense in it, and every one of you bring before Adonai, I'm sorry, I lost my, his fire pan, put fire in it, lay incense on it, and stood at the entrance to the tent of meeting with Moshe and Aaron. Korah assembled all the group who were against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then the glory of Adonai appeared to the whole assembly. Can you imagine? You're making this decision for selfish reasons, whether anybody else believes it or not. You know you are. And you actually showed up to challenge God and to show God that he made a mistake and picked the wrong person. That's an amazing place to be. I wouldn't want to be there. But Adonai said to Moshe and Aaron, "Separate yourselves from this assembly. I'm going to destroy them right now." They fell on their faces and said, "O God, God of the spirits of all humankind, if one person sins, are you going to be angry with the entire assembly?" Adonai answered Moshe, "Tell the assembly to move away from the homes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." Moshe got up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the leaders of Israel followed him. There he said to the assembly, "Leave the tents of these wicked men. Don't touch anything that belongs to them, or you may be swept away in all their sins." So they moved away from all around the area where Korah, Dathan, and Abiram lived. Then Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives, sons, and little ones. Moshe said, "Here's how you will know that Adonai has sent me to do all these things, and that I haven't done them out of my own ambition. If these men die a natural death like other people, only sharing the fate common to all humanity, then Adonai has not sent me. But if Adonai does something new, if the ground opens up and swallows them with everything they own and they go down alive to Sheol, which is what we call hell, then you will understand that these men have had contempt for Adonai." The moment he finished speaking, the ground under them split apart. And this is God, not somebody else, not Satan. This is God. The ground split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, all the people who had sided with Korah and everything they owned. So they and everything they owned went down alive into Sheol. The earth closed over them, and their existence in the community ceased. All Israel around them fled at their shrieks and shouting, "The earth might swallow us too." Then fire came down from Adonai and destroyed the 250 men who had offered the incense. So this is God. This is what he did. This is not bad things, evil in the world, or Satan. This is what he did. That was his judgment on them for basically, questioning his decisions. Because he had already said, when Moses speaks, he speaks as me. And so when we challenge whoever God's put in charge, whether we like it or not, and believe me, I've not liked a couple of them, but it's not up to us to challenge that. That's who God's put in charge for whatever reason. And we don't want to challenge God. So we should pray be led by the Spirit as to what to do next, but it's probably you leave that place, because you're not, unless God tells you to take out that pastor, which I've not heard before, but he might. uh, you need to leave, move on. Don't challenge God's decision as to who's the leader. So he punishes all the people, Jehovah does, by turning them all back out into the desert. And these men were supposed to be leaders. They were supposed to be the helpers and the ones that were holding Moses up. And instead, they started rebellion. So people on the edge of panic are usually easily swayed too. And Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, they try to assume control of the priesthood. They felt like, hey, I'm a pretty good guy. I should be in charge here, instead of who God says is in charge. And Dathan and Abiram are from the tribe of Reuben. So they're not Levites. They just want more power, but they're camped together. So they kind of are working together. Now, ultimately, what they want is more land and more authority and stuff like that. So they're really taking advantage of the agenda that Korah has. So basically, they're both working towards bad things. So they team up and work together. Their accusation is that Moses and Aaron have taken too much power. They're self-appointed, even though we learned way back that that wasn't the case. What they claim is a result of what we read in chapter 15 about the tzitzit, the tassels. And by now, almost everybody in Israel was wearing them. And it brought them nobility and priestly status, in these groups, these men. And now they wanted to cash in. They had kind of elevated themselves, and now they want to be part of what God's already blessed. So they say, hey, Moses, all the community is holy, not just you. So we should all be together, and we're equal. And we say that a lot today. We should have understanding, equality, and everything should be treated the same. But God's not about equality. That's not his goal. He is about separating, electing, and dividing. That's what he does. We're supposed to be apart, not equal with everybody else. That's not the goal. So as a Levite from the clan of Kohath, Korah was not eligible to be a priest. He was just going to be one of the helpers. So he was jealous. He didn't like that. Remember, Levites and priests are different, because priests are only from Aaron's line, but all the Levites actually serve in the tabernacle. So there are different levels of holiness and status. So Moses devises a test. He says, bring your fire pans and your coals, and they're all, present them all to the Lord right there at the sanctuary tent. And God will permit access to who he chooses. And, the chief indication of a priest is that he gains access to God by means of being able to go in the holy tent. So if they're able to do it, then obviously they're supposed to be priests. So in verse 9, Moses tries to remind Korah and those Levites who are following him that God has already given them a great honor. Then in verse 12, the story just completely takes a turn, because he's trying to say, you're already set apart. You're already elevated. So Moses sends for Korah's partners, and they're defiant. They don't want to come because they have a bone to pick more with Moses than Aaron. So Korah was really after Aaron's job. He wanted to be high priest. These other guys mostly wanted Moses' job, all the authority. So let's see here. So remember that Dathan and Abiram's tribal founder, Reuben, because they're from the tribe of Reuben, was the firstborn of Jacob. So by custom, he would have been the leader of Israel after Jacob's death, if everything had gone right. But God mixed it up and they messed it up. So it went to Moses. So some of this is built in generational jealousy. So then they say it is not Canaan flowing with milk and honey, but Egypt, what they remember. And that the only reason Moses really brought them out here is so he could lord it over them and be in charge. It's like saying, gouge your eyes out is kind of like saying, pull the wool over my eyes, trying to trick me. They're accusing Moses of deceiving the people, basically. So they say they want to give back their redemption and go back into the hands of the the enemy. And we do that. We're like, I would rather be fearful and anxious and go back than to move forward and go back into the hands of the enemy. So when we accept our redemption, our salvation, several New Testament passages make it quite clear that we can, with our own will, give that redemption back. So by deciding in our minds that we desire what the enemy provided to us more than what God's providing to us. So you can voluntarily give that up. You don't accidentally do it. You're going to fall asleep or say some magic words. None of that stuff's true. It has to be a heart issue that you are rejecting Christ the Messiah. Just like it has to be a heart issue that you are accepting Jesus the Messiah. So let's see. This was pretty typical tribal behavior. You're trying to fight over who's in charge. And these descendants of Reuben, after all this time, over 2 centuries of bitterness, they're still mad about it. And God took it personally. He's like, after 2 centuries, you still can't accept what I said. So Korah and the 250 leaders show up at the entrance. The Lord tells Moses and Aaron to stand aside, that he's going to annihilate everybody. And in verse 22, Moses asks, would you send your wrath on an entire community because one man sinned? Moses is acknowledging and questioning this principle of collective punishment. In verse 26, the reference to community was to those who did not stand with the rebels. So there is a thing called collective punishment. It's in the Bible. And Moses tells the innocent to disassociate themselves from the rebels. Don't touch anything that belongs to them. And that's what God tells us. It's like, get away from someone who is not living the way God wants them to live. Because if he decides to annihilate them for something, you're going to be, collateral damage, so to speak. So verse 25 says, Moses rose and went to the tents of Dathan and Abiram. So every sign they existed was wiped out at the hand of God in this moment of wrath. They no longer exist. So the rebels, their families, and everything they owned were purged from Israel, got rid of all of it, everything, because they had become unclean in God's sight, and he can't be anywhere around that. So basically their entire families, or in immediate families anyway, as well as anyone who agreed with what they did. So be careful who you're supporting, much less associating with. So another God principle, not everyone is permitted to approach God. Only the redeemed can come near to God. So the only reason we even get to God is because of Jesus. Without Jesus, you can't go another way. He is the way. So Jehovah declares that only priests can come near to his presence. Regular priests can come near to him, but only so much. It's only the high priest that is allowed to come closest to his glory. But even that is limited to only 1 day per year on Yom Kippur. So salvation gives us access to God. Moses is the sole mediator. There's no access to God without going through Moses, the mediator. And Jesus becomes that. And these who tried to replace the mediator were destroyed because they were trying to block people from God. Our only access to God is by Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, our mediator. And it was Moses who anointed the original priest in God's name. It is Christ who must anoint us with the Holy Spirit, which acts as our authorization to come near to God. But even then, there's a limitation to just how near to him we're allowed in our present condition. So the closer we become, the closer we come to him, the better he moves on our heart, the more he moves on our heart and changes us from within. So sometimes when we fear or we feel far from God, it's because of our heart. It's not God. He didn't move. How much time are we spending in his word and in prayer and in worship and with other Christians? Are we growing towards him? Because he doesn't move. We can move away from him, and that feeling comes over us. So I'm preaching a lot today. I'm sorry, but let's see. Our minds still have evil inclinations. So we're told of a time when we will get new bodies made of this uncorrupted material and new minds, and we'll no longer remember the former days. We'll even get nearer to the Father. And that's going to be amazing. But I think about how they felt about Egypt, and it's like, how can you wish that or want that? Well, think about how much we look back on high school as how great it was. And, it was 4 years, but most of us remember about 30 minutes of it. And we remember it fondly because we don't remember all the other bad stuff. That's just human nature. But that's chapter 16. I hope that made sense. Some of it may get a little convoluted, but as we get into 17 and 18, I promise it'll make a lot more sense. So God bless. Love God, love people, and change the world.